This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW. Written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 540, part 3, entitled "The Key to Men's Lib is the FIPping of Women." Carrying straight on. The third major way that women oppress men is forced fatherhood. That is, that women have the MARA, maternity rejection right, but men don't have the PARA, paternity rejection right. So women have the legislated right to reject an unwanted pregnancy that could badly screw up her life, but men don't. So millions of men are forced into an undesired paternity/fatherhood by women pill lying. For example, a girlfriend lies to her boyfriend that she's taking the pill, but in reality isn't, because she's in her 30s with her biological clock ticking hard, and she really wants to get pregnant before her fertility window definitively closes. So she gets pregnant, then forces the boyfriend to pay for the kid for decades of his life that he never wanted in the first place, thus manslaving him for decades, a major gender crime that the pill liar woman inflicts on a man, which makes masculists have an undiluted hatred of such women. So the masculists are pushing hard for the establishment of GECs, that's GECs, Gender Equality Committees, in the parliaments that consist half of female feminists and half of male masculists, so that the gender issues of both sexes are dealt with equally. One of the major pieces of legislation, in brackets, besides reforming the divorce courts, legislating the OPTAB, OPTAB, obligatory paternity testing at birth for all births, to block paternity fraud in women where the husband is not the father, so that a man can use the PARA so as not to be obliged to pay for a kid that is not his, and furthermore prosecute his girlfriend/wife/partner for paternity fraud, putting her behind bars for years for the major gender crime she has committed against him, close brackets, will be the legislation of the PARA, paternity rejection right, that will give men the same right to reject an unwanted pregnancy that women have. The fact that women have the MARA and men don't have the PARA is seen by the masculists as the most blatant form of sexual discrimination that exists. And it's not against women, but against men, that fills masculists with a burning sense of injustice and hatred against forced fatherhood. Masculists push for the establishment of a PARA that would allow a man to fill in a PARA government form, stating that he rejects the pregnancy so that the mother either aborts the fetus, or if she continues the pregnancy, then she bears full financial costs of the kid. Now, with the FIPping of women, the mother, if she decides to continue with the pregnancy, even if the father has taken the PARA, will be able to afford the upkeep of the kid because she is a FIP. So here we have another example of how the FIPping of women solves another of the major ways that women oppress men, by freeing men from being forced into manslavery, paying for a woman, or paying for a woman to raise a kid he never wanted in the first place. So we have here 3 major ways that women oppress men for decades of a man's life that can be removed by the FIPping of women. So you can appreciate the enormous importance masculist theorists place on the FIPping of women, and why masculists out in the field put such enormous moral pressure on young women to FIP up or to rot on the shelf, spat at by masculisted men who treat fluffies as vermin, as Untermensch, to be wiped out slowly by being totally ignored, not even pumped and dumped, forced to rot on the shelf by having their fluffy parasite genes removed from the gene pool, by them dying out, unable to reproduce themselves with quality men, since quality men will soon nearly all be masculisted due to their superior intelligence and hence more capable of picking up masculine ideas more quickly than the average Joe. It may also be obvious that the masculists need to reform society across the board, in the sense that it will not be practical to change just one aspect of society without changing the whole. For example, if one does not push for a general FIPping of women, then pushing for fundamental reforms in the divorce courts, as proposed above, will be less likely, since if divorcing mothers are not FIPs, then they will not be able to earn their own livings. So the fluffy feminists who control the divorce courts will continue to see the divorcing husbands as cash machines to pay for the fluffy divorcing wives. The masculists need to educate monoconscious feminists into becoming biconscious, so that feminists see that gender oppression is a two-way street, and that in fact women oppress men worse, since many of women's gender crimes against men last decades. For example, the Big Three mentioned above, that is, decades lasting man's slavery by women, the butchery of women, of men in the divorce courts, and women's forced fatherhood. With the divorce courts run by biconscious lawyers and judges, then the divorce laws will be much more men-feared than is the case today. If women are not FIPped up, then forced fatherhood is much more likely to continue, since women will not be able to afford to pay for the kid she carries to term in the pregnancy, if she is not a FIP, capable of earning good money and able to pay, for example, for a nanny to help look after the kid. The masculist theorists are very conscious that a whole masculist package of reforms is needed to liberate men. Gender expectations on men by women need to change so that women are made to be biconscious. Women need to be FIPped up. The divorce courts need fundamental reform. The GECs, the GECs, need to be set up. The gender laws need to be men-feared. For example, the PARA and the OPTAB, O-P-T-A-B, need to be legislated. The schools need to be boy-feared, so that little boys can be given male role models by having roughly equal numbers of adult male and female teachers at primary and secondary schools, by paying male teachers more to create a form of positive discrimination, so that more men are persuaded to become teachers, so that young boys can have male role models that they don't have today. So young boys grow up alienated in a world of female giants called mothers and teachers, so have to fend for themselves and learning how to behave as a male. Masculists want men's studies courses to be set up at universities, so that millions of young men learn about men's gender issues and how they can be solved with new gender laws that are men-fair. Masculist groups need to be set up on every campus and high school so that several billion men can be taught masculist ideas, who then pressure young women to FIP up, since most of the fluffy crapper damage is done in the high schools, where it is estimated that in today's world about 80% of young women choose to study fluffy crap majors, that is, the intellectually easy, intellectually lazy, memory-based majors that do not require analytic thought, such as math and the sciences. So these young women grow up to be fluffies, who then expect to manslave a man for decades of his life. With most young men in high schools well informed with masculist ideas, will be in a position to put enormous moral pressure on young women to FIP up, or they will pay a crushing price of not getting a man. So being manless, they will be loveless, sexless, babyless, and utterly rejected, both socially and sexually, which will drive many a young fluffy to suicide, her life will be made so miserable. So the masculist theorists are pushing for a masculist package deal, a whole interlocking set of changes in social expectations and in gender laws, so that each change is enabled by the changes in other aspects of men's lib. We are talking about a fundamental social re-engineering of society, a FIPping of society, so that men can be freed from the decades-lasting gender crimes that women commit against men. But before any of this can occur, millions of men first need to be made conscious that these reforms and changes need to occur. Millions, billions of men need to be made conscious that they are indeed oppressed by women, so that they think that decades of working for a woman who does not bother to FIP up is indeed man's slavery, and that such a fluffy woman deserves to be hated and killed slowly by being severely punished by not being able to get a man, forced to rot on the shelf, thus scaring billions of young women to FIP up or suffer a similar fate. It's hoped by the masculist theorists that the masculist gender politicians who occupy the masculist half of the GECs, that's GECs, Gender Equality Committees, will be men of real vision who see what needs to be done to society to be able to free men from decades of man's slavery at the hands of fluffy women who don't bother to FIP up and expect to live off the labour and money of a man, making her a man's slaver, and hence the hated enemy of the masculists who aim to exterminate her slowly by totally ignoring her, wiping her fluffy manslaving genes from the gene pool and out of existence. To masculists, the way to rid the world of fluffydom is to rid the world of fluffies, and masculists do that by simply ignoring them to death. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man's Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 540 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.